There's a YouTuber who I started watching him a while ago, and he got really big, pretty big. And I don't watch him as much anymore. It's just a time thing. But his name is Tim Pool, and he's a guy. He dropped out of school. I think it was in 8th grade. I think it is. And today he's very well. He does journalism, like actual journalism. He doesn't just sit somewhere and comment. He goes to places and like embeds himself and all that. And he talks. He co-founded a news group called Vice. I think it was Vice. He co-founded, and he said that they had this problem where they're hiring college graduates. They just made it like a requirement, have to have a college degree, which was strange because again he dropped out of school in 8th grade, and then they had these people coming through, and then they would tell them things like, "Here, go file these, go file these papers or whatever," and the college graduates were always asking like, "How do I do it?" Well, just figure it out. Just figure out a system and go do it. And they would just get stuck on that. Like, well, what do you want me to do? How do I do it? And then they were charging a lot of money because they were college graduates, and they weren't independent. They had to be guided every step of the way. And then they just figured, well, we can't really afford these college graduates anymore. So they thought, let's just try something. Let's just hire some high school graduates or some people who didn't finish high school. And then they came in and they gave them the same direction. And they weren't like 18, 19. They were like early 20s. So they've been out of school for a couple of years, around the same age. And he said at one point he and his partner had to come into the office because they hadn't gotten any phone calls. And they were worried, like, did everything just go to shit? What's happening? And they went in and they asked, so how are things around here? And they said, it's good. Yeah, everything's fine. We had a problem with such and such, but here's how we dealt with it, but no problem. And what they found was that people who went through college largely went there because they didn't know what they wanted to do. And then they became kind of dependent on this system of telling them, here's how you do this, here's how you do that, and just following directions. And like, for example, understand what I mean when I say this. I mean this in the best possible way. There are students sometimes, I look at their grades and I go, how on earth do you have like a 4.0, like a 3.8 or whatever? And I don't mean that in the sense of like they're stupid. It's just, I read their work and it's just like, it's like vanilla, I shouldn't say I like vanilla. It's bland, and it's not really insightful. It's not, it doesn't seem like it really comes from anywhere. You can tell sometimes when something comes from a person, like what they really are thinking about something, and when they're just putting stuff onto a page, and sometimes when they're just putting something onto a page it's neither of those two things, really. And these are people who I go, well, how do they have such high grades? And I realize when I interact with them, they're very helpful. They're very good at following directions. If I say do this, they go down the line and they follow the directions. They don't put much into it in terms of that sounds terrible, but you know what I mean when I'm saying this, yes? Yeah. And then there's a difference. Yeah, there's a difference in it. And these are people who end up going to college, and they'll probably go to college and not really know what they want to do, so they'll study something that'll be practical. But you need to kind of walk them through all the directions. And then sometimes you guys will hear me say this, like you'll ask me, you'll find papers in the basket over there, and you'll say, oh, my papers were over here. What did I do wrong? And I'll usually say to you, I've already explained it. Figure it out. I don't mean this to be an asshole. I'm not saying I already did it. What I mean is you missed something, so figure it out. Be resourceful. So what can you do? Well, you could come up here and grab a paper that's already been done and look at how yours is different from it, which some people do. Some people go to other people around them who know how to do it, and they ask them, how did you do this? In other words, they found you're resourceful. You figure things out on your own. And what they found was that the high school graduates were people, the non-college graduates rather, were people who had a little bit of a harder time in life. So they had to figure stuff out. And then the people who went through college, they were more like directions oriented, put in the right direction. And again, don't take this to mean that it's stupid versus smart or anything like that. Again, I have 2 bachelors, 2 masters, and a PhD, and I've got to be the dumbest motherfucker some of you have ever met before. There's no connection between having lots of degrees and being super, super smart, or having no degrees and not. What you'll find is that the same skill set that you need to be successful in life will also help you get through college. But if you have that skill set that could have gotten you through college, you'll probably also be successful in life in other ways, because you learn how to manage, you learn how to be resourceful and get through things. And so oftentimes in our society, and by the way, you see a big shift away from this right now, going back to what you were saying 10 minutes ago, about experience versus knowledge. It's one thing to know something. It's a completely different thing to be able to do it. Now, don't discount that, because if you're a person who wants to be able to do things, don't necessarily go to the person who can do it. Like you can ask yourself, let's say you want to be a boxer. Who would you rather be trained by? Would you rather be trained by Mike Tyson, or would you rather be trained by the guy who trained Mike Tyson? Mike Tyson's very good at it. He's a great boxer, but wouldn't it be better to learn from the person who taught him? It's like, man, if he taught him, he can teach me too. And that doesn't mean that Mike Tyson couldn't teach you. I don't know. But I do know that if he was alive today, Cus D'Amato could teach you because he taught Mike Tyson. So don't discount it, but understand things in their proper context. Yeah, when I say that, I don't mean like I say everyone should get into a fight. I'm not saying just go grab the biggest person you can find, although there's some honor in that. You might come back and go, hey, Skellen, I took your advice, I got into a fight. I didn't say to get into a fight. I said everyone should be in a fight. In other words, if there's something in your life at some point that's going to be worth fighting for, there's going to be some opportunity for it. And it's not like you should just go out and like shove people until someone finally punches you in the face. All I mean is that if you get into a fight, you do learn some things about yourself. And one of the things you'll learn is that you'll survive it. You'll be okay. And then that means that you don't have to be as afraid in the future, because a lot of times we're afraid because of what could happen. Like, oh, if I lose this fight, I could lose a tooth. Maybe you come back to me and you're like, oh, Skell, I got punched in the face and I lost a tooth. This is your fault. No. Again, you followed the directions. But I also would have told you have head movement. Don't stand in a straight line. I could have told you lots of things. But my point is just that there are consequences for that. There's consequences for getting into a fight. There's consequences for defending. There's also consequences for not getting into a fight. There's also consequences for not defending things that are important to you. Like I was saying a minute ago, when you think about the things in your life that are worth fighting over, what are those things in your life that are worth fighting over? This kid I was talking about earlier, he was willing to fight with somebody because they were talking to his girlfriend in a math class. Now, would that person be willing to defend his family if someone was talking crap to them in the street? Now here's a better question. Is it worth defending your family against somebody who's talking crap to them in the middle of the street? If somebody has time to go off on you and talk crap to you in the middle of the street, just think about that kind of a personality type. That person is probably not going to work on Monday and running their Fortune 500 company. That's a person who's putting his priorities in the wrong place. You get into a fight over what? Like, I just saw one yesterday. It was a fight over at Petco. Because it's really worth fighting over which team you don't play for, who's playing in a game that you can't afford to get into, right? And so as long as you wear the right colors, and it was just fine. I was watching these people just fight. I'm like, really? Because your team won. You're not even on the damn team, and you're gonna fight over that. And then you're like, well, that guy was talking shit. So that's enough to get into a fight. And if talking shit is enough to get into a fight, here's the real question. What is it that's worth fighting? What is it that's worth killing and dying over? Because that could be the consequence of getting into that fight. What is it that's worth killing and dying over? Somebody walks up to you in the street, robs you, puts a knife on you, give me your wallet. Ask yourself that question. Is it worth fighting and dying over this wallet? Maybe not. Maybe it is worth killing and dying for, though, to protect your honor or to do the right thing. Or you might say, nah, give them the wallet. All those decisions, understand there are consequences for them. There's also consequences for not. That person robs you and they get away with it. What are they going to go do? Rob somebody else, and then somebody else, and somebody else. So it's working it out. It's working it out. You want a person who's able to think like that. If you just say, you know what, any situation, first chance you get into a fight. That's a warrior who can fight, and they're trained and they learn how to. They learn how to. They don't learn if they should, if you follow. And then you've got scholars who are really good at explaining the theoretical basis for just war hypotheses. But then they can't actually do it. And so what do you have? You have fools and you have cowards. So which of those would you rather be ruled by? Which of those would you rather live with? Would you rather live with warriors who can't think and just do whatever they're told? Or would you rather live with scholars who are too afraid to support them, back themselves, and back up their own ideas. You know? Unfortunately, we make that dichotomy today. And it's not a dichotomy that has to be the case. There is a third option. I'll grab the right marker. A warrior scholar. You also, a phrase you might hear from time to time is a warrior monk. It's another thing that people like that are called. These are people who are both warriors and scholars combined into one. That was actually the ideal for most of human history. Most of human history, we don't look at these things as being separate and distinct. This is a really modern thing, man. Where we think about like the dumb jock. And you go, oh, he's good at football, but he's really stupid. Well, then he's probably not going to go very far. You know, all professional football players have something in common, by the way, which is that they went through college. Whether they graduated or not, something different. But they did all go to college because you don't go into the NFL straight out of high school. There are very few basketball players who do that. There are several baseball players who do that. But for football, because you need the physical development over 4 years to compete at that higher level, they do go through some school. And they have to have a minimum GPA in order to play. So at least there's some of that going on, you know? But how do you become both of these things? That's a full-time job, man. I mean, how many people do you know who are that way? That they can fight, and then they can also think really, really well. If you meet one of those people, they're probably a unicorn today. You know, it's like someone who can defend you and make you laugh. A clown ninja, I guess. A warrior monk. But some of the places we come across those are like really high level. You come across like Navy SEALs, for example. I know several of them. These guys are both of these things over here. You can't just be one of those things. You've got to be a thinker as well. A lot of politicians are just this. They're not warriors at all. And so all he's doing here is he's making an observation that if a country separates its scholars from its warriors and makes it so that these are two separate and distinct things, which, by the way, I'm not sure who's in worse danger here. I'm not sure if it's the warrior who's in danger here or the scholar, because the warriors can always overtake the scholars here if they're cowards. But if the scholars are smart enough, they can put up barricades in life to stop that from happening. But if you do this, then you're going to have the warriors you have people. So you have a country where its thinking is done by these absolute cowards who don't really stand for anything. And if you don't stand for anything, what do you oftentimes stand for? Just yourself, really. And if you can't think of anything to stand for, it's just constant war. So I guess the ideal, therefore, is to be both. Should you be a thinker or a warrior? The answer to that question is probably yes. Now, at the very least, to be capable of being a warrior, even if you're not one at present. But I'm thinking I'll change up some of the details because some of you might know who this person is. A former student of mine reached out to me a couple of days ago and was telling me, I gotta give away too much. Essentially, he's getting anonymous phone calls from somebody who's threatening him. And it comes through with a phone number. And so he reached out to me and said that he feels like maybe he should call the police, and whoever it is seems to know where he works. I'll leave it at that. So he reached out to me and just said, I don't know what to do. I feel like maybe I should call the police, or maybe I should message back and say, hey, I think you've got the wrong number. He said, but ultimately what's really bothering me is I realize I can't defend myself. It's not the sense that he wants to be able to beat up everybody in the world. It's just that he realizes that if anything went down physically, he has no capacity to defend himself. And in other words, he finds himself now in a world where he's a young man going out into it, and he's completely helpless. He's dependent on the help of others. If somebody assaults him, what does he have to do? Call the police and then wait a day or two for someone to show up, if anyone ever shows up. But yeah, that's a similar problem if you're just the warrior, if you're not the scholar as well. There are problems in life that you can't solve with a club, that you can't solve with a gun. You have to solve with thinking. In other words, this is kind of the last stage of thinking. In other words, if you have ideas, you need to be able to defend them. And if you have an ability to defend things, you need to have something to defend. Both together. So it's an ideal. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? That didn't work out. Next time.